Welcome back to Off Ball Takes. This is your host, Yarby and this is my co-host.
Wells.
We appreciate all the support on our recent content. And before we do get started, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And follow us on Instagram and TikTok at the OBT Podcast for more content and updates.
Yes, we are back at it again with another new video. This time around, since we're done with the off-season rebuilds, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to do a tier list where we're going to go through the two different conferences, and we're going to talk about, where we feel like a lot of these teams rank. We're going to do East and West, but first we're going to do, in this episode, the Western Conference, where we're going to put our teams into tiers and kind of just rank them so we can kind of see where they stand around the league. So for my tier one, I just have one team, and that's the Oklahoma City Thunder, right? Those are the defending champs. They were the best team in the league last year. In the playoffs, of course, right? The dominance at home was there, right? But they did have two games where they went to 7. It's the same roster. They're running it back, but it's a younger team, so you're expecting some internal growth from a lot of guys. Unfortunately, we did learn, right, not that long ago, Thomas Sorber, right, their rookie, tore his ACL, so he won't play at all this year. But you'll have Nikola Topic coming back, and even then, everybody else will still be there. So you still got, starting 5 like Shea and J-Dub and Chet, Hartenstein, Lou Dort, and everyone else. So they're a regular season machine, right? SGA largely is a durable player, very consistent in terms of his numbers, right? Rarely has games where, he just doesn't show up on the offensive end of the floor. So they're going to be able to probably still win close to 60 or more, if not more than 60. I think we both picked the over on them. I think their over was 58 wins. So to me, they're in the tier 1 by themselves until another team proves that they can beat them. And in fairness, right, Denver was close last year. They took them to 7. They had some injuries, but I still think Oklahoma City has earned the right to be in the tier 1 by themselves. And yeah, I feel like we've done this a lot each year where it's like I remember the Nuggets win the championship and it's like, oh, they're in the tier by themselves, and then that ended up not being the case. But I think you just project that Oklahoma City, even without roster additions, they have guys coming back from injury and they should be better. So I think they're tier 1.
Yeah, automatically. I'm glad that we're starting off on the same foot. I'm sure we'll have, some minor differences, but yeah, I do have Oklahoma City as well in tier 1. Pretty self-explanatory. You already talked about it, but the defending champs, they've earned the right to be there, solely and alone. And I think, that's the interesting thing about the Western Conference is it's kind of up for grabs below that team because they've proven so much, but we're kind of just waiting for the next team to step up to the plate and take the throne. But regardless, you do have Shea, the young core. They're on track and on pace to get better and better each year. So as long as that trend continues, they're going to be a force for a long time.
Yeah, exactly. So it's all about even if they don't win as many regular season games as they did last year, they're still to me the best team in the league and the team to beat in the Western
For sure.
Conference. So moving on, we move into tier 2. Tier 2 is, like you said, where we probably will have some differences. So I have 3 teams in tier 2. I have the Denver Nuggets, I have the Houston Rockets, and I also have the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Wolves one is the one. So what I'm going to do for most of these is so I'm going to have a team that I think could be a team that could climb into potentially like a tier 1, and then a team where it's like they might be tier 3 if things go wrong, right? So like Denver, I think of those 3 teams, I think is the one that I think might be the likeliest to get to tier 1 because you have Jokic, right, who's one of the best players in the league. They've added depth. They have a great starting 5s, and now they have quality players off the bench, both guys that are vets and guys that are young that could be better. You got Deron Holmes coming back from injury. You still have Peyton Watson. You still have the other young guys that they drafted with Hardaway, with Bruce Brown, with Valanciunas. So that's a good team, right? They have size, they have depth. Hopefully their defense should be better. You do have a young coach with Adelman, right? Because he came off his rookie year coaching last year. But it seems like they got great chemistry. Of course, Michael Porter Jr. is not there anymore. It's Cam Johnson, but I still think that shouldn't make too much of a difference in terms of I think that plus the depth that they have, I think should make them better and closer to Oklahoma City. But they're still in tier 2 because I still don't think they're quite as good as OKC, even though they match up well with them. Houston, right? They obviously made the big move of getting Durant. They have a bunch of depth. They have a bunch of size, right? So they should probably be able to win a bunch of regular season games. And with Durant, you should be a better playoff team than you were last year. You just have the question of he is 37, he's in year 19. So is he going to be able to get through the whole regular season plus the postseason in one piece? But you also look at the young guys and you just say, well, those guys can be better. Men Thompson could be better. Şengün can be better. He was great in the Eurobasket. We'll see if that carries over into the NBA season. So they have, so they have a lot of upside, I would say. So to me, they're also in tier 2, and they could have flexibility to maybe make their roster even better. So that's the other factor you look into as well. With the Wolves, they went to the conference finals last year. They're the one that's the trickiest one because they, unlike Houston and Denver, really didn't make any significant moves, right? They lost Nickeil Alexander-Walker, but you're anticipating some of their young guys like Dillingham, Terrence Shannon Jr., Jalen Clark, whomever, right? You would assume that those guys get into the rotation, add some talent, right, and just add some juice to their team, some more athleticism, and they should still be pretty good in the regular season and the postseason, right? Because we know Edwards is a playoff riser, didn't have a great series against Oklahoma City, but still got to the conference finals, and he should continue to get better as well, right? He's another young guy with a lot of upside. But that could also be the team that I could see of those three maybe being the most likely to fall into tier 3 just because, well, they didn't really do enough to probably make you feel like that they're better than they were last year and that they could be, in a upper tier. So if they're just kind of the same, and then say like if Dillingham still quite isn't ready and the other guys are just okay but not great, because Nickeil Alexander-Walker was a reliable vet, at least in the regular season. So they could potentially fall into tier 3, and I could see them easily being a tier 3 team. But they've also, because of the fact that they've been to the Western Conference Finals twice, they've kind of earned, the ability to kind of be in that tier. But I could understand why people might feel differently.
Yeah, I have the same three teams as well. Slightly different reasoning, right? I think with Denver, they're probably the closest as you can get to being a tier 1 team. But they are just missing some things there here and there, because I think OKC has proven that their youth and who they have and the way that they play ball, simple as that, is definitely proven to be the best in the league by far. Denver, they also have a guy like Jokic. They have like you talked about Cam Johnson, but I think there are question marks of, well, what does Jamal Murray look like? Because I think a lot of their postseason success is going to pretty much hinge on, well, can he have some superhero games where he and Jokic are the best players on the floor no matter what, night in, night out. I don't know how likely that's going to be this year. But they still do have a great solid core with Jokic, Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon as well. So they obviously have earned a spot here no matter what. Houston is probably the most, I guess, unproven team to be here, and it's kind of based on hypotheticals, right? Because we do have to see,
Right.
Durant's first game and what he looks like as a Houston Rocket, but on paper, in theory, they're definitely one of the more dangerous teams, I think, in this tier, because they pose a huge threat to Oklahoma City with what they can do offensively and defensively. Right now, they have a bona fide closer, a bona fide guy who's probably going to get you 25 a night, if not more, depending on what he looks like you talked about. Or age 37, not year 37, excuse me, but age 37 for this guy. But we already know, certified bucket getter, and hopefully that'll be the catalyst for something special offensively for that team, because we already know they struggled with that night in, night out, in the postseason and regular season. So hopefully they look better. Minnesota, that's the tricky one. They're the one I think that's, like you said, kind of on the fringe here and there, but they definitely have the most glaring problems, right? You still have the Mike Conley problem. You still have the Julius Randle problem that will probably rear its ugly head in the postseason. Granted, played fairly well throughout the postseason, but definitely had some stinkers. So that's kind of where they're kind of getting dragged down, but they're being carried hard by the fact that Ant is such a great player in the regular season and postseason as well. So I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Yeah, and that's another guy who's pretty reliable in terms of he doesn't miss a lot of time, and in terms of his stats, yeah, he can have some bad games, but like by and large, you can count on him to show up during the regular season, right? Like he's not going to miss 3 weeks at a time, and he's pretty consistent with what he does. It's just the funny thing is relative to Oklahoma City, right? It's like with Houston, they have a lot of size, and athleticism and rebounding, kind of like Minnesota, but it feels like Houston, at least in the regular season, felt more like a problem for Oklahoma City, just because like when you look at Minnesota, like they're big, like obviously you got Randall and Nas Reed, but say like Gobert as a center, he just can't punish guys offensively quite as much to the degree that say like I don't know, like a Şengün or somebody of that nature can punish them, right? But like you said, with Houston, a lot of it's still on paper. because you still have to see Amen Thompson, offensive strides, jumper, close range offensive game, right? Outside of just kind of being able to just bully his way to the basket with his athleticism, which is still a cheat code, right? But you have to have some other skill aspects of your game, right? And, some of the other young guys like Shingun, Jabari Smith Jr., we love everything about this team on paper, right? Offensively, I think that's the part where I'm kind of curious to see what that looks like, just because you don't have a lot of guard play, right? But you do have Kevin Durant, right? Who's still an upgrade over the guys that they had. So that's, kind of where I think it can be really intriguing to see that matchup play out, right?
Yeah.
But like I said, Minnesota, I feel like is probably the most controversial one of the three because of those three teams, they did the least in the offseason. Most of their work was done through the draft, right? Because they drafted Baron J and then I think Zakarski, right? Right? So they mostly drafted bigs, if I'm
Mm-hmm.
not mistaken.
Yes, sir.
There was another. Yeah, did they draft another guy?
I think that was it.
Yeah, so yeah, exactly. So and those guys probably won't be as much of a part of the rotation anyway. So you're banking on everyone else. And like you said with Mike Conley, with his age, right? How does he hold up against the best defenses in the league? And he didn't hold up well against Oklahoma City. You do have Ant, so he can kind of handle a lot of the playmaking, ball handling, because he's improved, the playmaking aspect of his game, but still. So now we move into tier 3, right? So I have 3 teams in this tier, right? That maybe this might be different for you, but I have the Clippers, I have the Lakers, and I have the Warriors in this tier, right? Just because, you look at the Clippers and obviously they're going through some stuff right now, so we'll see what that looks like when they come out of it. But on paper, right, they do have a great roster. It's a lot of depth, right? You have some good star power at the top with Kawhi. But the reason why, even though they took Denver to the brink, and then, if they beat Denver, what does it look like against Oklahoma City? The reason why I can't put them in an higher tier is just because you just can't bank on those guys to be healthy over the course of the whole season, right? Kawhi usually misses a lot of time. It's an older roster, but they do have a lot of depth, so they can still win a lot of games. But just against some of these faster, more athletic teams, I do have some questions and concerns about what that's going to look like. And then even like with a Harden, right? We know in the playoffs he's a guy that's not as reliable, and he's an important piece to this team. Like you do have Zubac, but you still need Harden to be good on this team in order for them to be the best version of them. And we've just seen like in the biggest games, you just can just probably bank on him probably not showing up, right? So I think that kind of puts a cap on how good they can realistically be, even with the other talent, right? Then Warriors, Lakers, right? Those teams are a little bit different because I feel like most of the analyst consensus is probably higher on the Clippers than those two teams. It's just with the Lakers and Warriors, right? They also have star power too, right? Like with the Lakers, you have LeBron, you have Luka, of course, right? He looks like he's in great shape. So he's probably going to have a monster season. They added DeAndre Ayton, they added Marcus Smart, they added LaRavia. Didn't really have to give up anything in order to get those guys, but they did lose Dorian Finney-Smith, and they don't have a lot of great defensive players on this team. They do have maybe some upside potentially for a trade, right? People have mentioned Wiggins or maybe a player like that. So, they're of those 3 teams, maybe if they get some type of defensive wing or some type of additional help in the front court, right? Maybe they could move up a tier. But we're looking at these teams as is. So that's kind of, what I mean when we're looking at these tiers. And then for Golden State, right? We know that the Steph and Jimmy combo was great. When Butler got there, they were like, 23, 24, and 7 when he was there, during the last 30-ish games of the season. But now you're going to have to do that over the course of 82 games, plus the postseason. And if you haven't seen the roster right now, they've not made any moves, right? They have currently 10 players on the roster, and we're just a couple weeks away from training camp. So that's not really a good sign. They have guys that they're supposed to sign once the Kuminga thing gets sorted out. But sounds like Kuminga will take the qualifying offer, which if you do that, then to me, I think that puts a cap on what they could probably realistically be. It's not because he's bad, but he doesn't want to be there. I don't think you're going to get buy-in, and you're not going to get a whole lot back for him if you trade him unless you add other guys to that roster. So I don't, if they pull a rabbit out of a hat, get a crazy trade, where they can bring in a guy who can be like a consistent third offensive option, especially from the perimeter, then you just kind of like the Lakers, you can move them into tier 2. But we're dealing with the rosters as is right now. And, their roster still has the most questions because they need to field a complete roster. But if they get those guys and then kind of figure that out, like they're still going to be a good team. It's just kind of like the Clippers. They are relying on some older players. And not that the Lakers aren't, but like, because they have to rely on LeBron, but most of the other guys are not that. But that's kind of where I would have the tier 3 team. So, but that one I feel like is might be the trickiest one, because I don't know if I would probably say like these teams have the potential to move into tier 4. Like if they were in tier 4, it would probably mainly be because they had a bunch of injuries, in my opinion. I mean, maybe you might be lower on one of these teams than me, potentially, but I feel like Lakers and Warriors probably have a better chance to move into tier 2 if they can make some moves to improve the roster.
Yeah, that's fair. I have a slight difference. I have the Clippers and Lakers in tier 3. That's it.
Okay.
I think the Clippers are very close to being tier 2 because of what they provide on the defensive end. You have Kawhi. You have some, you have some great bench pieces as well. The depth is there, 100%. You bring in Chris Paul as well to be kind of, that floor managing guy alongside Brook Lopez as well. That's great big man depth. Hopefully, it looks good in the playoffs, and that's always the question with this stupid team. And that's why, they're not in tier 2 for me. I'm being so serious.
Right.
And that's the problem. It's always going to be how many times do we have to teach you this lesson, and that's why they're here. With the Lakers, I like what they're doing in theory. I just have to see it.
Right.
Right? Like, I love the pairing of Luka. He looks like he's on pace to have a monster season, right? Based off of what we've seen in the Eurobasket. The fitness, it looks good. Conditioning looks solid. LeBron, I think, he has a lot to prove this season as well. I think it's just the surrounding pieces. What do these other guys look like? What does DeAndre Ayton look like on this team, right? That's a question mark. How do you, slot in, Marcus Smart, both offensively and defensively? So there are things that are kind of bugging me about this team that don't make me want to put them in tier 2. In theory, yeah, any team with Luka should be in tier 2 minimum, but the fact that LeBron is the number 2 and he's up in age, nothing wrong with that, but you don't have, a clear-cut, concise vision on what the starting lineup should be, especially when you have guys like Rui that you have to factor in. You have AR, who also needs the ball as well. So offensively, what are you going to look like? Defensively, what are you going to look like as well? So those are my tier 3 teams.
Yeah, and that's kind of where, when we look at those teams, like say for the Lakers, like to me, in order for them to move up, they would also have to make moves in order to improve the roster. So as currently constructed, I think that they would be tier 3, because I don't think defensively they quite have enough to be able to right now be in one of the upper tiers.
I agree.
If they do stuff, then they could move up. But we're doing this as the teams are currently constructed. Clippers, if they move into tier 4, it would probably be because that off the court stuff and some
for sure.
Basically, yeah,
nuking the team, right?
Yeah,
I got it.
Yeah. It's like worst case scenario, like Kawhi's contract gets voided and the picks are taken away. But they should be good enough to be in tier 3 at a minimum because of, like you said, the overall depth of the roster and the defensive versatility that you have. They do have some older, slower guys, so that could be a concern. But like you said, those teams should still be good.
Yeah.
So tier 4. Moving on.
Boy.
I have a bunch of teams because just spoiler alert, I really only have one team in tier 5, but pretty much 7 teams in this tier 4.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Mavs, Spurs, Grizzlies, Pelicans, Suns, Kings, Blazers. So I feel like a lot. So with these teams, I feel like of these different ones, the Mavs and the Spurs would be probably the most likely to move up into tier 3 because, like, if you have the Mavs, if you have a healthy Kyrie, if you have an healthy Anthony Davis, if you have a really good Cooper Flag rookie year, and all the other pieces, work, and then they make maybe some moves to get some more perimeter help, then they can move up into tier 3, and then they will look like a really good contender. But it's just a tricky roster because where's the offensive production going to come from? They have some good offensive players, but you're not going to have Kyrie for a while. AD, I think his status to begin the season is up in the air because he's got the eye thing that he's got going on right now with the eye surgery. And they do have a lot of size and depth in the front court. But I'm just concerned about the offensive execution, right? And especially because it's like, all right, AD is going to be the big scorer, but you're still going to have guys that are going to get him the ball. Cooper Flag's going to have the ball in his hands a lot, but it'll be a learning experience for him as a rookie, right? He might be really good right away, but not everything may click. They may not automatically just win a bunch of games. Spurs, to me, with them, they're kind of the other team where, okay, if everything really clicks, then they could move up into tier 3. Because say you get Wemby, who's like destroyer of worlds, top 5 player on both ends of the floor. You get that. You get De'Aaron Fox, who slides in as a really good complementary number 2 guy. Dylan Harper is really strong as a rookie. Stephon Castle takes a leap in year 2, right? Jeremy Sohan, is like a really good consistent outside shooter,
Right.
and right. But like with some of those other teams, a lot of that's on paper. I can't just automatically bank on all of those things happening. Now, it could just be, well, Wemby's just top 5, and then they're just a tier 3 anyways, and they'll win a bunch of games because they won 33, 35 games last year with Wemby missing like half the season. So that's a good that's a good point as well. I just feel like they don't have quite as much proven talent after those two guys to make me feel comfortable about putting them in tier 3 right away. But I think those two teams probably have the most upside of the teams in this tier. And then the Grizzlies, right? You got Ja, you got Jaren Jackson Jr. Jaren Jackson Jr. is already hurt. So we're going to have to wait, I think, to see him a little bit, if I'm not mistaken, because he had the toe injury, I think. Toe, foot injury. Zach Edey's hurt. So he's going to be out, I think, to begin the season, right? And then, obviously we'll have to see what else happens with the rest of the roster. They have some good players. They have some good young guys. But, but you traded Desmond Bane for Caldwell Pope. Caldwell Pope didn't have a great year last year. But I do think you might miss some of the extra playmaking, ball handling, and scoring that you got with Desmond Bane. And you're also going to have to bank on Ja being healthy, right? And he's just not been a guy that's been reliable either. So if he has to miss time, you're not going to have 20-plus point per game Desmond Bane to, kind of bail you out, especially if Jaren Jackson Jr. might potentially be out too, with Zach Edey and these other guys. So, but I guess the best version of them maybe could be tier 3, but I feel like they need a little bit more talent alongside those two guys, unless one of those young guys just turns into a monster, in like year 2. Like say Jalen Wells, huge leap where all of a sudden he's like a complete, scorer as opposed to like a 3-and-D wing, or Zach Edey's like a 20-and-10 guy or something like that. But I don't know if we're gonna see that right away.
Right.
So they'd be there. Pelicans, they're kind of a tricky one because I don't feel like they're as bad as the team I have in tier 5. Because I think the team that in tier 5 is the worst, one of the worst teams in the league. But the problem is you can't bank on Zion being healthy. And, if he's not healthy, it's probably going to be tough for them to win a lot of games. They do have a lot of talent because they have a lot of good players, right? You got Trey Murphy. You have DeJounte Murray, who you'll have to wait on to come back because of the torn Achilles. You got Jordan Poole, right? You have Herb Jones, and Yves Missi and Jeremiah Fears and Derek Queen and all these guys. But we've already talked about them where they're just not a great fit together. So, I mean, they're like, I would say that the teams that I listed above them will definitely